All right, welcome everyone. I'm Patrick Ellis. I want to welcome you to our weekly podcast, the ECONversations with the Southwest Riverside County Economic Development Minds. So we've got Grant Taylor with the City of Lake Elsinore, Kimberly Davidson with the City of Wildomar, Christine Damko with the City of Temecula, Scott Agajanian with the City of Murrieta, and we have Rob Moran with the County of Riverside. And I'll let Rob introduce. He's got somebody hiding off in the background there in our picture.
I will
let him do a quick little intro so that everyone kind of knows who that is and what's going on, and then we'll get on with our conversation.
She's kind of hiding back there with the moving boxes, which I still haven't unpacked, but I want to introduce Kim Wright, who just joined us. She's a longtime friend of the program, so to speak. She actually worked with the county for many, many years. And then we're fortunate and thrilled that she's back with us working in economic development. And most recently, she was with the City of Eastvale for almost 2 years and is bringing her wealth of economic development experience and marketing experience back to the county. So I'm personally thrilled because she's going to provide a lot of leadership and support in economic development here in Western Riverside County. So welcome, Kim.
So, welcome, Kim.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
All right. So today we're going to have a very vibrant conversation around a very vibrant topic. We're going to talk about demographics. So we're not going to talk about the exact demographics. I think what we'd like to talk about is demographics on like what it means for cities, especially when it comes to conversations having to do with either site selectors or developers or businesses what we're trying to attract or encourage to expand into our areas. So I'll throw this out and let anyone jump in, and kind of this might be one of those really good round robin conversations rather than me kind of calling on y'all. But we see all sorts of different types of demographics all the time: population numbers, median incomes, daytime population numbers. Maybe if you guys want to share kind of what are some of the demographics that you see that are important. What are some that that site selectors are very interested in, but maybe some that are more in the area of like, is that really a good indicative number of the community that that you're serving?
Great question, Patrick Ellis, and I'd be happy to get started today. I think it really depends on your audience, because I think different audiences are going to have different data demands and different data sets that are important to them. We were very excited when we got over 100,000 in daytime population, because my argument to that is that we can no longer be called a bedroom community when there's over 100,000 people that are staying home every single day or coming here to find their job. So that to me is important for certain types of businesses, right? For a restaurant, that's a very valuable number and statistic. But for a manufacturer down the street, it might not be so necessary as finding out about workforce data. So I really think that data sets are usually very specific to what type of business that you're looking with, what type of end user you're working with. But I would like to know what Kimberly Davidson thinks about this.
Well, you know what? Well, thank you, Scott. I was just writing a note to myself, so I'll just jump in with that. What I think was going to be really interesting too, based on what Scott just said, is to see how COVID has shifted some of those numbers. Because, what was I not supposed to say COVID so soon in the conversation?
Today. It was a no COVID day.
Scott's face just lit up. Because we, as a community, as Wildomar, and I know all of our communities, Temecula, all the way to the county of Riverside, we've been struggling to try to create more jobs locally in our region continually, so as to keep more people in town during the day and provide more of a lunch crowd to our businesses. And I'm wondering how much of that is going to be changed. I know currently because of COVID and everybody working from home, a lot more people working from home than commuting. And I wonder what that number is going to look like going forward, and how many people are going to continue telecommuting instead of going into their places of business in either San Diego or Orange County, and what that looks like for us as far as economic development. How did COVID change some of our demographics traffic numbers. I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. It excites me a little bit because maybe we will have a larger percentage of telecommuters than we might have had otherwise, because some of those businesses were forced to get their systems in place and were forced to allow employees to stay at home and work. So I think to some extent, for me, that's one of the silver linings of COVID is now we have a certain number of people that are staying home and can't really go to our restaurants right now because they are somewhat closed, but they are staying home, they are in town, and they're spending more of their dollars while they're in town.
Yeah, and that I'll jump in on that, and to both Kim and Scott's point, you know, and I think if there's a silver lining to this is, and an economic development opportunity, it's what Kim just mentioned, is we do have an opportunity to try to make maybe some of those telecommuting, you know, habits that we've formed over the last 4 months more of a permanent business model, because it's been forced, it's been regulated, as opposed to let's try to sell or pitch the concept, and then some businesses maybe, you know, it may or may not work, or they may not have that philosophy. And I think, like you said, they've had to live with this, and so they've probably had to rethink their metrics on how they review employees and the output and production. And at the end of the day, it could also be a smart business decision where someone doesn't have to pay as much of a real estate cost for an office space, for example. If half the people are telecommuting, or most of them, maybe they only have to release 5,000 square feet instead of 10,000 square feet. That's, you know, money in their pocket and savings that business is going to achieve. And I would argue that it's also a business retention tool for employees, or an employee retention tool, excuse me, for folks that, you know, want to work for that company, but they love the idea that they don't have to go into the office 4 or 5 days a week. Now, of course, that works in certain sectors and professional services, you know, maybe not so much in manufacturing where they have to be in the facility, you know, hands-on. But even there's probably occupations that could telecommute to some extent. But certainly for the professional services, which, you know, we have a fair amount of our population that is, as Kim mentioned, commutes into LA, Orange, San Diego County. But the whole demographics discussion, to Scott's point earlier, is that it really kind of quantifies who we are and what we're all about. And it depends on your audience. A retailer is going to have a far different need for information than maybe a logistics operator or a manufacturing company, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. And as we all know on this call, because this is something we all get questions is, well, why don't we have this type of retailer? Or why don't we have that type of retailer? And a lot of it's just based on numbers, and, you know, adding to demographics is psychographics, right? It's the numbers, you know, kind of combined with behavior based on people's backgrounds and kind of predicting what they'll do. But that tells a lot about who you're going to get in the community for, you know, restaurants and shopping opportunities, which, again, that's the question we get all the time, right? Why don't you get this company? Or why don't you get that restaurant? Or why don't you get this specialty, whomever? And a lot of that has to do with numbers, and whether there's enough of them of a particular type to bring somebody in. So it's, and I think in economic development in general, you know, we have to be data driven. We have to be more sophisticated. Are you talking about behind my back, Scott?
I just muted it really quick so I could say what I had to get out of my system, and now it's done.
Okay.
Somebody walked up to my door and I didn't want to have the conversation video.
Well, and you know, Rob, I would say to that too, that from an economic development standpoint, it can be very frustrating sometimes, whether right now we're speaking to the general public or to site selectors, kind of the same conversation, that it can be a little bit frustrating when they are sitting in an office somewhere else, say in a different state. They're looking at maps, they're just looking at the data. And sometimes that doesn't tell the full story. Sometimes they need to understand our traffic patterns here. They need to understand our buying habits. They need to understand the habits of our community and how our community works, because sometimes just looking at a map and knowing what your radius is to your next store and that sort of thing, it doesn't really work. There's, there's certain directions that certain cities don't go on the freeway to shop. And it doesn't matter how close that next, Costco is or Trader Joe's or whatever it is you're talking about. And they can't figure out, as they're sitting in their offices in a different state, why aren't we getting more people from that area to that particular store? So I would just say, if any site selectors watch this, you do need to understand there's kind of a magic to it. There's a habit of the people. We're human. So it doesn't all work off just data-driven numbers and maps. And if any of the general public is watching, just know too that sometimes we can't control what the retailers are telling us, that we don't need a store there. And you're like, I guarantee you do need a store here. I can prove it, but maybe the data doesn't show that for some reason. Data is not the end all be all. And there's another piece, there's a human element to it too. And I think sometimes that gets left out, and it's very frustrating, I know, to everybody on this panel, because we've all come into contact with that, where we can't get some sort of retailer because they think they're too close to their other store, or they think that, there's not enough of the proper demographic there. And sometimes that's not truly the case.
And I would add one further thought to this whole discussion, unfortunately related to the current environment. And I don't know if a year or two from now, we're going to look back on this and go, man, that was just a really weird year. I'm glad we got through it and things are back to normal. And
I hope so.
We all do. Or if there's going to be, and we know there's going to be some permanent impacts to this in terms of behavior, but I think it's going to make it even harder moving forward. I think, the retail sector has been hit so hard with this, not just here, of course, but nationally and even internationally, that I think it's going to be, and this is, I want to throw this out there for your opinion. I think they're going to be much more selective and, dotting every I and crossing every T than before, where a lot of retailers were like, we're going to have one in every city, we'll be fine. I think they're going to be so much more selective about, and I'm talking about retailers in particular and restaurant chains and those sorts of things. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but get your thoughts. I think they're just going to be much more selective in where they go and don't go.
I think so too, Rob. Not just more selective, but more hybrid as well. Yeah. I think we're going to start seeing more restaurants with more drive-throughs, obviously more patios. I think that they learned a lot from this current pandemic. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more hybrid type situations of retailers and restaurant type uses that we've never seen before. Maybe a high end, maybe a Mastro's or something with a drive-through and a patio, maybe something we've never seen before. Okay, we'll do that in Wildomar. Mastro's, come on down.
I definitely want to, since we're just jumping in on the points here, I definitely want to jump in on the points that I think Rob and Kim were both making, which fall along the lines of there's going to be a change. And I know this isn't a COVID conversation, but a really good point that Rob had touched on earlier was the difference in professional services and how you're going to see less space necessary. I think Amazon started a process of downsizing retail space and making retailers realize I have to do this in a smaller footprint than I was before, and I have to go omni-channel. I think you're going to see, to some degree, this happening with Office right now, which is I don't need as large of an office footprint, and I need to downsize my staff, at least in person, and have more people who are working telecommute. So you're going to see that kind of more. And I really want to appreciate Kim's point, just about the way that there's a difference between the quantitative and the qualitative aspect here, which is supremely important, because we use data to tell a story, but sometimes the story tells the story. And it really depends, once again, I think, on the audience that you have as to whether they're specifically a data set story listener, or there's somebody who really wants to hear the actual tale of the region. And all of that's going to kind of play together to figure out how far apart they need to have their footprint from one store to the next. Some companies are very familiar with the area, and so they can kind of read that story and see it for themselves. But there's plenty who aren't, that you're talking to somewhere very far away, and you're really relying on your ability to storytell, and sometimes the data's ability to storytell within that. And I want to give a lot of props here to Christine and Temecula, because they do a fantastic job on the data side. And I know they have some good partners that they work with in it, but it shouldn't go overlooked how well they've been able to recruit off some really good data storytelling. I think you guys do a phenomenal job.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Yeah, for us, demographics is really, we view it completely different from where we were, I would say, 5 years ago. And now we view it as an art, if you will. Really, we spend a lot of time on demographics, and to the normal citizen, demographics might mean age, population, education, and for us, we really concentrate on the psychographics. The behavior is key for us, and pairing that with comparing it with the overall region. This region, people are willing to drive. People are, I guess, accustomed to driving farther than the typical demographic allows, I guess. And so that is a story that I'm constantly telling. I'm sure you all as well. And the psychographics are huge when really comparing demographics, and then also taking what's on the ground and comparing it. So we compare existing stats to our companies right now, and we compare them to who we're trying to attract. We take other cities and take their stats, even their demographics, and can compare it against ours and paint the picture of the story. So we're constantly, I would say to my staff, that is, if you can paint a picture using demographics, you're an excellent economic developer, and you have made it. And it is not easy, and we struggle with it as well, but I think that is key, because you guys are right. At the end of the day, you know, when we're trying to recruit Nordstrom's, they're looking at the numbers, and that is a factor of life that we live in economic development and business recruiting. So it's a lot more in depth than I think even city staffers know. That you kind of sit, at least I sit in my desk, and I say to myself, okay, our population's 114,000. Who cares? Like, what does that mean? You know? And so it's like my job to say, how does our population impact you, whoever you is? And so that's the artistry of the job.
Christine, just to tie into that a little more, I would think psychographics become more valuable in a city like yours, where, you know, tourism is such a big part of the game, right? Because you guys draw so many more people than people are going to see when they look at a number like population or workforce and that other stuff. Could you maybe dive into the tourism aspect a little bit and how that changes the way you have to frame the discussion? Yeah,
and I haven't even mentioned, we have a whole psychographic component to our visitor, because our visitor is different than our resident. So our resident is typically like you have a younger resident, and then our visitors are typically the older. And so how do we attract the right retail for each one? And it's interesting. And then what defines a visitor? Because we have a huge component of people who live in Riverside County, but they shop in Temecula. And so that's kind of like the nearby visitor. And then you have the visitor that's outside the county, that's outside of the region. And so you have all these kind of different bubbles, and they are, they come to Temecula or this region for different things.
Very cool. And then before Patrick jumps in, because I think we're doing a great job of keeping him out of this, you know, there's one city that we know is going to grow and expand beyond anything that we can comprehend. It's a city I would never want to go toe to toe with, and that would be Lake Elsinore. And maybe we can get Grant's feedback on what's happening there.
Well, it's, you know, my colleagues have made some good points. The business world, the models are changing in the COVID era. It is specific to the audience, who's looking, what they're looking for. I still think the population is important, the critical mass, the synergy, the average household income, the spending power, but it's changing. The virtual meetings, the downsizing, retail is struggling. What is retail and malls going to look like in the future? Here, with all our open land, we're getting all the light industrial, the logistics folks looking at us, the Amazon types, the e-commerce wanting to come in, and it's different. Years past at ICSC, we're looking for some of the upscale retail stuff, the Trader Joe's, the Nordstroms, and in this evolving business model, I don't know if they're going to be viable. It seems like we're getting bombarded with requests from the e-commerce world. It'll be interesting to see how things play out. We've been forced into this virtual technology business model, and I think businesses will stay with it even when COVID passes. It seems to be a good viable model where people don't have to commute. You can downsize the square footage you need, and be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and that's the big question mark. We just don't. We're gonna keep Patrick out of this. That's the big question mark. We don't know when all of this ends, whenever that will be. What does that look like? Do restaurants get to fully open up again? Do movie theaters get to fully open up again ever? Hopefully, but we don't know at this moment where the end chips are going to fall. That makes it very difficult looking at things going forward.
Right.
What that looks like. What is the future of retail? What is the future of restaurants? What is the future of office space? Hard to say from where we sit at the moment, right?
It is. Will retail bounce back? Will e-commerce swallow them up? Hard to say.
Patrick, it's probably a great opportunity too to bring up the Census 2020, which is in full effect right now. And how important that is that everybody fill out the census and make sure that we get the correct demographics for each city. Because not only is that important for your economic development people to use in trying to obtain different retailers, restaurants, and office space, all of that sort of stuff, but you are also dollar signs to your city, your county, and your state. And we're going to be redrawing the lines for some of our elected officials and whatnot. So there's endless opportunity with getting the correct count for Census 2020. So please make sure, if you're watching this, if you have not filled out your census form, please do so. If you haven't, somebody will be visiting your door and ringing your doorbell, which I'm sure you probably don't want here in the year 2020, because we don't like the pop in, as they would say on Seinfeld. So if you don't want the census to pop in, you better fill it out now and get it in there.
I don't want to exaggerate by saying that just about every piece of public policy and even private decision making is based on the census and what it builds on from this point forward. It's really as simple as that. And if we underrepresent ourselves, we under-resource ourselves. And so it's really critical that we absolutely, we stand up and be counted. It's just that important. So, Patrick, I helped you out there. So if you don't want to respond, that's fine too.
Here. Well done, Patrick.
I completely 100% agree. And I think that is one of the challenges too, is because of what's going on right now is there's not as many people on the streets as there has been in the past. And so because of that, it is extremely incumbent on us to educate those who are out there to get online, fill out the thing and mail it in, whatever way you need to do it. There are resources out there to help, but it is extremely, extremely important. And if there ever was, a more important time than ever, this is it. So, yeah.
And this is one of those times when sorry, Patrick, you look like you had a new thought coming in, and I didn't want that to happen. But this is one of those times, I know there's many who don't like to have the big brother feeling, and they get worried about things like census because oh, we're being watched and we're being targeted. I think we've proven ourselves over the years that the census is not some pernicious, evil, state program that's going to come in and take over your life. We're just getting a number count. We're just trying to get some data sources.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of the foundation of all data sources that are built on thereafter. So it is hugely important. Please make sure that you do it. It takes like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Scott, I would suggest to you that if anybody out there is worried about being tracked or Big Brother, then just get rid of your cell phone, because this does more of that than anything
It's not
else.
the census that's
Not
doing
the
it.
census, it's your cell phone.
And they're finding out much better data from you on your cell phone than they were from the census.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So don't worry about the census.
Yeah. Which actually is a great point, because, when it comes to demographics and site selectors and that's where they're getting their information from nowadays, is from the cell phones, right? We know that from a lot of the different partners that we work with on a regular basis. So I want to kind of go back to one point that was made that I think is really important right now, is this idea of the telecommuter, right? Because I know that a lot of us in this area for at least the last, 5 to 10 years have been working extremely hard on trying to convince companies, whether they're in San Diego or in Orange County, to allow their workforce, which we know a lot of them live in this area, to telecommute. But we've never been able to get them to pull the trigger on that. Now there's been this forced, opportunity to telecommute. And we now see a lot of companies, large companies, Google and Twitter, to name 2 of them, that have basically said is, this telecommuting thing works. And there's a way to track it, and there's a way to keep track of everyone and everything. How do we now, though, kind of figure out the demographics, and how does that play into positively for, areas like this, where we know we have a huge amount of or the potential for a huge amount of telecommuters, because so many people in this community, still probably 60+% that are commuting to either San Diego or Orange County or wherever. But now we know there's going to be probably a substantial percentage of those that are now going to be working from home or from like a co-working type place or something here in the Valley. How do we start grabbing that information and using that to our advantage in this, in this scenario when it comes to attracting businesses here?
Yeah, well, as this opens up, I think businesses have the opportunity to be more flexible. And I think one of the challenges to telecommuting in the past has always been, the structure and rigidity of certain industries, thinking that people won't work from home or that they can't work from home. This is, to me, the data set here is the opportunity. It's the opportunity to show companies that you can still provide the output that they're looking to see, and maybe even more so. I mean, there's been studies that are done that have already detailed this in the past, that you'll get more output out of a worker that's given a flexible work schedule or giving telecommuting opportunities, because you're taking some of the challenges that they have to getting to work and providing the service you need away. And so if you can do this now on a temporary basis, as a worker, you're able to show that you can still be valuable and provide the services that the company needs. So to me, I think that the real opportunity here is for companies to see that they're still getting productivity. And if you're getting the productivity, why change it? Why make it more difficult on your staff? And particularly from regions like this. So, average commute times here run up into the 50+ minutes. That's not a good commute time. That's not what you want your staff to go through. So for the companies that care and say, I can take, an hour and 40 minutes of my employee's life off the freeway and give them that day back, and they will be more resourceful, more alert, more ready to work for that. I think that there's a good compromise here for both sides. But a lot of it just comes down to being more flexible and understanding that that's kind of the wave that we're going to see things going towards.
Well, and I see it as an opportunity really for co-working, like you had said too, Patrick, that co-working spaces will be really even more important into the future. I've always had a theory that there's a certain percentage of employers that just aren't comfortable with their employees commuting or telecommuting from home because of liability issues. They can't control if you get up to get a cup of coffee and trip over your cat and break your leg on company time. Is that the company's problem, right? or they don't want your home computer logging into their systems and giving you access like that. And productivity. You know, we're all kind of doing 25 things at once, including laundry and answering emails and, you know, watching kids right now because they're home, being homeschooled. But all of this, those employers that weren't comfortable with that were forced into it because of this. But going forward, I think they'll see the opportunity to not have their employees on the road and some of the opportunities there, but it might be a really good opportunity for co-working places to really take a stronghold in the economy, because now you take all of that risk away. You've got a computer, maybe a company issued computer at the co-working space, in the space they lease. Your OSHA liabilities are reduced because you're in an actual office space. And of course your productivity is questionable. I mean, I think when you're working from home, you're kind of working 24/7. So it kind of all melds together. But I think from a quality of life perspective too, I think a lot of employees would be thankful to go just down the street and work at an office that they can leave behind at 5:30, 6 o'clock and go home and focus on their family and children. So I think for the employee and quality of life issues and for the overall health of the employee, because you really can't have, we're all in an emergency situation right now, but long term, we can't have every employee working 24/7 from home, kind of like what seems to be occurring right now. So I think over time, I could really see a surgence in co-working type space and having more of those pop up around our region and around regions that were more affected by commuters and people staying home. I don't know that everybody working from home going forward is going to be a big long-term solution, but hopefully the employers will see the opportunity in co-working spaces.
Agreed. And then Grant, I'll use an analogy that you're used to since you're a surfer. You want to put your toe in the water on this one? Might be a good time to jump in from the Lake Elsinore perspective. You actually have commuters going both directions, right? You've got.
We do. Yeah. A large amount of our population does commute. It would be nice to be able to keep them at home, and maybe with the computer capability and the virtual, that'll encourage them to stay home and work from home, improve the traffic, and, you know, generate some jobs. Be interesting to see how these business models evolve. It's the world's changing out there now with this COVID. We'll see.
Yeah, I think, you know, one point you make there, Kimberly, is right, is that, you know, and I was going to say, you know, we're going to talk about demographics, but there's some odd, you know, not odd, but, you know, unique demographics that I think are starting to kind of bubble to the surface now, that probably weren't really discussed, you know, even probably 2 or 3 years ago. One of which your point is spot on, which is broadband. You know, how much broadband is available in a community? You know, how much is within certain you know, tracks of housing. Is it fiber? Is it, what is there? Because that plays into that question is there enough bandwidth for someone to telecommute from home? Or do they need to go to a place like a co-working? And then do co-working then locations need to start looking at how much bandwidth do we have coming into a building to be able to truly, if you've got, you know, 20 different people at any given point using the same pipeline that's coming in, is it enough to really keep those people effectively up to speed that they need to be for whatever business it is that they're engaged with?
Yeah, I think that's just the modern, you know, infrastructure question, right? It's just a continuation of the already existing question that we all deal with on a daily basis: is the infrastructure in place for any particular business or industry to come into a space? It's just the, you know, the new age version is do you have fiber optics that's going to give you the capacity to run this kind of intellectual network in a new region?
Yeah.
Cutting out, Scott.
Patrick does that on purpose. Anytime I don't toe the line, he does things like that.
You're being monitored.
Yeah, he's watching me.
But I will say too is the one point that Christine made, which I think is very, very true and unique for our area, is that the whole traffic trade area for Southwest Riverside County, because it is totally different than almost anywhere else in Southern California, and I think most of us are born and raised in Southern California and kind of know how it works in Southern California. And this area is totally different because, you're talking this whole valley will go anywhere within the valley as need be. But not just that, is you have these, areas that are just outside, Hemet and San Jacinto and Anza and these different regions that will come into this area because it's easier and more effective for them to come here than it is to go into Riverside, or to go into the desert. So I think that, telling the story regarding that trade area and the traffic, aspects of it is very, very critical for telling that, for telling the story to whoever it is that we're trying to attract.
And Patrick, you bring up a good point that I've had this long held belief that as we become denser in terms of population, that a lot of retail services and where we spend our time doing things is going to be far more localized than it may have been 10 or 15 years ago. Meaning, if I 15 years ago, if I wanted to travel to Murrieta from Riverside, it might have been a 30-minute drive, depending on the time of day. And you could just say, okay, I'm going to go down there to do that. And, that's just not something that generally occurs anymore, because it's not just inter-regional traffic, it's intra-regional traffic. And so you're going to want to access that service that's closer to home, because it becomes, I don't want to get on the freeway and drive an hour for something, whatever that thing is. I want to go down the street. And part of population density brings those services too. So, one, sort of feeds the other. But, a lot of that, is that you really can't. It's not just, I don't want to go to LA because it takes a long time. It may be, I don't want to go to Moreno Valley from here because it takes too long. And so you pick the services that are closer to you based on what your individual needs are and what's in your area. And so kind of contrary to a little bit to what I was saying earlier, but as we grow and we become denser, people are going to want that stuff closer to them as opposed to going to where it's at.
Yeah, although to Scott's point is the, going back to that infrastructure, aspect, that's a huge part of it, right? We've seen, Temecula, Butterfield stage is through, and that's changed that traffic cycle there. When Clinton Keith opened up, obviously that totally changed the way, people get through. Dominagoni Parkway for Menifee and getting everyone in from Hemet. And I think you'll start to see, that we'll constantly see this, right? We're all looking at ways to, improve that infrastructure so that it does still provide that ability to get there in a timely manner and take care of what's needed. But I do, yeah, you're right in that. I think you're going to see retailers especially are going to, evaluate their locations much more than ever before.
Rob, you set him up to make a nice comment. The whole goal here today was to not let Patrick make a good comment. I guess,
I blew it.
To circle this back around to economic development, as you talk about densification and how it affects people's behaviors and patterns, I guess the question becomes is, are we doing a good job as a region in amenitizing our communities so that people do feel like they can find what they're looking for, right at home without having to make that have to travel? And if not, what are we missing? And I think that's a whole other conversation topic we could jump into is, what do we have and what are the gaps and what do we need to do next? Or we could just do it right now and we could do like a game show where you just tape two and then we all just act like we weren't wearing the same clothes during the next one.
We've all got to change shirts. We got to look like it's a new day.
So, no, I appreciate your time. I know that we're coming up on our time. So thank you guys for spending the time with me again. I look forward to doing it again next week. But encourage you, anyone, if you get a chance, look at all of the different podcasts we have on all the different topics. As Scott says, this is just, dipping your toe into the water right now, but come right in and view all of our podcasts. I encourage you to do so. And thanks for joining us. And thank you everyone again for your time.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take